All right, we are coming back with the second episode ever of the Two-Wheeled Rider podcast. I am your host, Mario Orsini. I am joined by my good friend and co-host, Brian Boyer. Brian, episode 2. And if we're being honest with people, we have no idea what the feedback is from episode 1 because we're recording episode 2 before episode 1 even goes up. But I think you enjoyed yourself the first time. What are you looking forward to about doing the second one?
No, I just think the first one went pretty well. I think everything kind of flowed. We'll obviously see what the feedback is, which is the most important aspect. But, I thought it was great. At the end of the day, we're talking about motorcycles, and motorcycles are fun.
Yeah, and, we're not doing this for ourselves. We don't want to hear ourselves speak. I mean, we'll have to listen to play back in the edits, but I don't know, maybe I will go stream it every once in a while just to help the stream so we have, at least 2 people that are streaming it. But ultimately, we're doing it for you guys. So, again, we'd love to have your feedback. We'll set up some sort of platform where you can contact us, maybe in more of a group setting so you guys can see what other people have had to say and some of their ideas. But in the meantime, you can just email us at twowheeledrider.com with any sort of ideas you want, or you can head over to my Facebook page, Two-Wheeled Rider, and check it out there. So, as usual, new episode, new bourbon. What do we have? We did, so just for the record, we did not drink this entire bottle. There wasn't a ton of it left, but we've got Rebel Yell single barrel Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey. This is the 10-year-old version. I don't remember what proof this thing is. 100 proof. So we went up. We were on 90 proof the first. We can't keep doing that. We'll end up dead.
It's important to progress, right?
Yeah, exactly. So we're gonna have a sip of it.
Cheers.
Cheers. All right, Brian. So what do you think of the Rebel Yell?
I like it a lot.
It is pretty good.
Yeah,
smooth. Yeah, I wonder if it tastes that smooth because we had Bullet before, but it is smooth. And granted, ours has been sitting there for a few minutes, so the ice has melted just a little, and that's just you get a little bit of ice melt, a little bit of water in there with that bourbon.
That's perfect.
Some good stuff. So. All right, so we've come up with our topic today, and a lot of these topics are coming from you guys indirectly because you don't even know the podcast exists at the recording of this, but they come in via emails from my YouTube channel or comments from my YouTube channel. And one of the most popular questions I get, and I don't go a week without getting this in some which way or form, is, hey, what bike should I get? And that's I have my progression I go through on, deciding what type of bike's going to work best for an individual or for myself for that matter. But ultimately, there's no right answer. There's no wrong answer. It's what bike's going to be best for you, and only you can make that decision. So I think what we want to do in today's video or in today's podcast is talk about what you need to consider when buying a motorcycle and all the different factors, and hopefully provide you guys with enough information, enough things to think about that you make the right choice. Because it is, when I say an investment, I don't mean you're going to make any money off this. You're going to lose money because you're going to be riding it, hopefully, and it's going to go down in value, and you're going to spend a bunch of money. But that's not what it's about. It's about having fun. But you are making a financial investment in this, so the last thing you want to do is go out and spend $10,000 on a motorcycle that you never ride. I mean, that's ultimately what we're trying to help you guys out with. So normally should I get this bike or this bike? But it doesn't really matter if it's should I get this bike or which bike should I get. It's all the same questions you're going to have to ask yourself. And fortunately, a lot of them are pretty easy to answer. It's just stuff people don't think about. So you want to hop into this?
Yeah, so it's really customizable, right? So those questions are stuff that you have to ask yourself because everyone's a little bit different in what you're looking for. And that's the most important question is what exactly you're going to do with that bike.
Yeah, and that's the thing. What's best for me is probably not going to be best for Brian unless we're doing similar types of riding and maybe your similar skill levels and those sorts of things. So asking your buddy about specific things about a bike is probably fine if he has it, but it's not a one-size-fits-all thing. That's why we have so many different brands, so many different types of bikes, all those sorts of things. So I think we'll and Brian kind of touched on that early on already, is what are you going to do with the bike? And that to me is always the first question. And to me, there's kind of 2 parts. What do you want to do with the bike, and what are you actually going to do with the bike? Because those are 2 different things.
Yep, yeah, exactly.
Like a lot of people have these aspirations that, I'm going to travel all around the country on it. Are you? I mean, I'm not saying you won't, but you got to be honest with yourself. Are you really buying that bike for the purpose of long distance riding?
Yeah, the best bike's the one that you're going to actually ride.
No, you're right about that. So does it make sense to go drop $25,000-$30,000 on a new Goldwing if you're really just going to go out and ride with your buddies for a couple hours every Saturday? I'm not saying it's still a bad choice. I'm just saying if your goal is I want to ride cross country, okay, now we've kind of narrowed down the field of the bike we're looking for. But if your goal with this bike or what you're planning on doing with this bike, which by the way, that's why I have so many different bikes, because there's no perfect bike for everything. It's perfect bike for that situation. If your thing is I just want to go out and rip on mountain roads on the weekends, okay, then we've narrowed it down. If your thing is I want to commute on the bike, we've narrowed it down. I want to go do some like trail riding.
And you might do multiple things, right? I think if you make that list of saying, here's everything I'm going to use, I am going to commute on it, I am looking for some overnight trips, there's a bike out there that can kind of fit, most of that.
Yeah, and from the standpoint Brian and I are coming from, I mean, those of you that follow my YouTube channel for a while know that I like to go do, week-long, 2-week-long, 3-week-long motorcycle trips. That's my thing. I also like to do some off-road riding. I like to do some sport riding. I haven't done as much of it lately, but, do some track day type stuff, like those sorts of things. So that's why I've got a few different bikes to meet all those things. Brian, on the other hand, you do a lot of off-road riding. You do more, to be honest, he does more commuting on his bike than what I do. So, you're probably not commuting on a dual sport most days, but you know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, exactly. You find the bike that's going to work best for you.
Yeah, and I'm currently riding a Yamaha FJR, and it does everything I kind of need. It's perfect for commuting, fitting my laptop and everything that I need for the workday, and then it's also great for when my wife and I take a overnight trip.
Yeah, so it kind of meets what your goals are, and that bike's still sporty enough that if you want to go out and do, some twisties, yep. It's a little bit heavier. I mean, it's not a sport bike, but
it'll do the job.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the first question. You have to ask yourself, what do I want to do with the bike, and what am I actually going to do with it? And Brian, hit a good point there in that it may be a list of things. It may not just be one thing. So then, you've got to find something that's going to at least check most of those boxes. Or maybe you figure out, I want to do, cross country riding or big trips, but I also want to go ride gnarly off-road stuff. Might need two different bikes at that point.
Well, I think that's the thing of, especially why with my bike, I try to get it everything that fits into most of what I'm going to do, because while I would like 5 different motorcycles, I would find myself single.
I'm not going to say anything. I'm not, because I'll see Kathleen at some point, and I do not want her to smack me. All right, so then the next thing is, and it's just a fact of life, not everybody can afford everything they want. Otherwise, I'd probably have 40 motorcycles in the garage. So you got to come up with your budget. Everybody's going to have a ceiling of what they can spend. Figure out what that is. Only you truly know what that is. And then some things to consider in that budget are, are you going to pay cash for the bike? I mean, that's always what you'd love to do is pay cash. I know not everyone can afford that. Some people are going to finance it. So take the financing cost into it. Sometimes you can find closeout deals where, the manufacturers are throwing out like 0.9% or 0% or 2.9. Just be careful on that, because sometimes it's an introductory rate for the first 12 months or 6 months, and then it jumps up to like 14%. If you're going to finance it, find out what's already available. Do your research, especially if we're talking about new bikes, and we'll talk about used ones too. Do your research before you get to the dealership to find out what's available for specific brands, makes, and models. And if they're not doing anything special, it's probably a good idea, if you kind of narrowed down your choice already, go ahead and go to your credit union or your bank or whoever that you have a relationship with or borrowed money from before to see what they have available, because they might have something that's available that's a little bit easier, and they'll give you a little bit of negotiation then on the price of the bike, because we don't have to deal with manufacturer dealer financing.
And I think that's going to be a common theme in this conversation is research. You just want to be educated on all the pieces, and that way you can make the best decision when you're purchasing a motorcycle.
So, no, I agree with you. And whether we're talking about new or used bikes, and I want to touch on that before we get into the next part of it, but not quite yet. One of the other things you need to factor into the price of owning a motorcycle, notice I said owning, not buying, because this is a cost you're going to have later, is maintenance. if you're like me and you work on all your own stuff, maintenance probably isn't that big of an issue. So maybe I just look into, hey, what a parts cost for this one? Because that's going to be a cost to me. But the actual labor hours, that to me, I want to work on it myself. So I don't take that into account.
Yeah, but you still want to consider a little bit of that, right? Because at the end of the day, you definitely want to be riding more than you're working on the motorcycle.
No, and you're right. And this is, typically speaking, European motorcycles require more maintenance than the Japanese motorcycles. And what I mean by require more maintenance, I'm not necessarily saying they're breaking down more often. It's just that the maintenance intervals are typically closer. Like, I think my Super Adventure, it's like 18, we're just going to call it 18,000 miles because it's done in kilometers. I think it's 30,000 kilometers, valve checks. But I think on your FJR, it's something like, it's either 24, 26, 28,000. And by the way, I don't know anyone that's ever really had to adjust them on that bike. They usually are within spec. But that, if you're riding 15,000 miles a year, you can figure every 2 years, I'm going to be checking mine basically once a year, somewhere right around there where you might be able to go 2 years.
And that was a big deciding factor with my bike. I know that, we can work together and we can do all that ourselves. But at the same time, I have a lot of other stuff going on with work and dirt bikes to work on. So I wanted something that would I can commute on every day and I'm not spending a lot of time working on it.
But I got to make back in the garage videos, so I need bikes I have to work more often.
We'll still find something.
So anyway, take that into account. I mean, especially if we're talking about Ducatis, KTMs, typically speaking, a valve, especially for the Ducatis. I'm not real sure on the KTMs, but on valve checks, and when I say valve checks, I mean, they're changing spark plugs, they're changing the oil at that point. You're probably looking at, around $1,000 plus to have that service interval done. And, it might be one of those things where I'm going to ride the bike 3,000, 4,000 miles a year. Okay, then you divide that out over the course of time and go, well, that service is going to cost me X number of dollars per year. And you've taken that into account at the price of the bike. So just something to be aware of. Do your research on the bike. Most of those types of things like first service, major service, those sorts of things are available on the manufacturer's website. And if they're not, just ask. So anything else on maintenance?
No, I think we covered it all.
Next up, it's not as big a deal for you and I now because we're into our 30s, but I remember going to look about insurance when I was like, I don't know, it was probably 20, 21 years old. Maybe, no, I don't even know if I was that old. I was probably like 18, 19. And I wanted to insure a Honda CBR 600.
I did the same.
I could have bought a new bike every other year for what they wanted for the annual insurance premiums on that bike.
It's insane. It's insane. And honestly, from personal experience, when I went to look at 18, it got me out of it. I said, well, I'm just not going to look at a bike because I didn't think there was any other option. So I was like, wow, insurance is that much for a motorcycle. So I waited when there were plenty more options out there that I could have gone and got cheaper insurance and been riding a motorcycle.
Yeah, and so what I ended up doing, we checked with every insurance company. I could not afford a full coverage policy. And I'm not exaggerating at the time. And keep in mind, I mean, we're going back 15 plus years at this point. They wanted $4,500 a year to insure a bike that I paid, I think at the time, like a little over $6,000 for. I was like, that's insane. I still bought the bike. I just put liability on it. Yep. And I locked it in a garage, and I was very careful about, because I had no theft insurance, none of that. So, I mean, I took a risk, but I mean, you could do the math and go, well, you get your bike stolen every, 15 months, and what you saved in insurance, you're going to get it back. Because I think my insurance ended up being, I don't know. It was probably like $300-400 a year. It wasn't awful, but it was just liability insurance. But I guess the point of this is, depending on your driving record, depending on your age, depending on the bike, and sport bikes typically are more to insure. It's kind of crazy. I went from a VFR 800 to the FJR 1300. The FJR was newer. It makes more power. Is a more expensive motorcycle. My insurance went down. And the reason for that is, no offense to us, because we both own the bikes, or anyone else that rides them, it's kind of an old man's bike. I mean, my friends used to call it that and still kick their ass on it, but it's an old man's bike. And what I mean by that is it's an older, for the most part, it's older guys that are riding them. They're more responsible. They're more experienced, and they crash less, and they get stolen less because nobody wants to steal an FJR anyway. And so the insurance premiums are less on it. So, I mean, that's a big factor in it too, versus, we go out and buy the new, ZX10 from Kawasaki. I mean, that thing's going to get stolen if you leave it out in the parking lot, and chances are, it's going to get crashed if it's a newbie rider on it, and that's why the insurance premiums cost more.
Yeah, so speaking probably more generally to the younger riders, don't get stuck in that trap of thinking, I got to have a cool bike, I got to get the sport bike. It's cool if you have a motorcycle.
Yeah, nobody really cares what it is. I mean, nope.
You're still going to have fun.
It's just fun. It really doesn't matter. So another thing to take into account are tires. And I'm not crapping on sport bikes. I love sport bikes, but they eat up tires way faster than a touring bike or a cruiser or an adventure bike. Maybe not adventure bike if you got badass knobbies on it, but you're going to go through a rear tire 2,500, 3,500 miles. Like, they're not going to last very long. They're not cheap. It's just, I want you guys to consider all the aspects of what it costs to actually buy one and own one, and not just think, oh, I can afford this monthly payment, or I have X amount of dollars in the bank, I can write out a check. There's other expenses that come along with it, and those are just things that you want to take into account. The other thing is, we've talked about research already. We're going to get into a topic here in a minute. I think Brian's got his show notes up in front of him. I don't want to get there yet, but talk to people that have one. The best way to find out about a motorcycle is talk to someone that owns one, because you're going to share your experience with them, good, bad, indifferent, whatever. And I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying ask them if you can go ride theirs, but talk to them about it. How's the bike been? What do you like about it? What do you not like about it? They have nothing to gain or lose off of it. It's not like walking in and talking to a salesman and they're going to tell you everything great about it and leave out, all the other stuff. But talk to someone that owns one. Talk to someone that's lived with one. If you hear them say something like, I'd never buy that bike again, and you still want it, offer him a really low price. Maybe he'll let it go.
No, I've been riding motorcycles, dirt bikes, then motorcycles my whole life. And I still, before I buy anything, I always ask someone. Did that with my motorcycle with FJR and asked you.
Yeah.
And I kind of explain what I'm looking for. I don't want something that I'm working on all the time. Here's what I'm going to use it for. I know you had one. What do you think about it?
And it's still, the FJR is still one of those, when I see them pop up at a really cheap price, I go, I should buy that. And then I don't know what I'm going to do with it. It's a great bike. Like, I may go ride it. It'd be awesome to have friends ride, but it's just change the oil on it. There's not a whole lot else to do. And that's what's great about that bike. Makes good power. It's just a great bike. But yeah, you talk to people that own them and find out. I mean, in my case, you're like, why'd you get rid of that? And I'm like, well, I really like the Super Adventure. There's nothing against the FJR, but I have no bad things to say about that bike. And that is still one where guys reach out to me about wanting to get started into sport touring, because you can buy those things pretty inexpensively. And that's one of the first ones I recommend, whether it's sport touring, whatever. I mean, you can turn it into more of a touring bike if you want, but yeah, you got to talk to people. I want to backtrack just a second before we get into the next thing I want to talk about before buying a bike. I want to go back to new or used for a minute. I don't want to get into too much detail, because I know we'll go into a little bit more detail when we get into street bikes, and then we get into dirt bikes a little bit, because there's going to be some differences. But when it comes to buying new or used, that's where it comes back to your budget. Maybe you really want, a Harley Davidson electric glide, but you can't afford to buy it new. So go find a nice used one. You're taking a lot of things into account. I mean, if you are financing it, you're probably going to pay a little bit higher, not insurance, but interest rate on it. But you can save a lot of money buying a used motorcycle. You just need to be careful. We could probably get in, and we will in the case of some of the street bikes and some of the dirt bikes here, and as this podcast progresses on. If you don't know a lot about motorcycles and what to look for, that's where your research comes in handy. Like, specific models have specific issues that people already know about. Like, it's just a weakness of the bike. Find out if that's already been fixed on it, or if it hasn't. Gives you a little bit of negotiation tactic there. And if you don't know a lot about the mechanics of a motorcycle or what to look for, call a friend. I mean, I just went out, I don't remember, it was last weekend. Rusty called me and wanted to go look at a dirt bike. I love Rusty. He didn't know shit about dirt bikes. So I went out and took a look at him. Like, yeah, it's a good deal. And, we brought it back. And I've done that for other folks, where we go out and take a look at a bike. I mean, I even did it for a YouTube subscriber. He was looking for a Super Adventure. I happened to be up in State College working for the week, and he's like, hey, I found this bike. And I was like, you want me to go look at it? I got to drive past there on the way home. Went and checked it out, emailed him back. So have someone that has some knowledge about them go take a look at it. If you don't know yourself, but whatever you do, unless it's just a price that you're really familiar with, like an SV650. I mean, there's certain things on those that I don't give a crap what the price is. If I find it for this price, I'm just going to buy it because I know I can fix whatever on it. But I don't recommend buying bikes sight unseen unless you have full trust in where you're getting it. And we're talking about used bikes, especially from private parties.
Yeah, and don't. I mean, you mentioned, talking to a friend, but say you don't have someone that rides or has the experience, and this kind of touches a little bit on our first episode, if you haven't listened to that, about building a relationship with your dealership. Don't be scared to go in and ask them, oh, because I'm not buying the bike here, I can't ask them a question about a used bike. They're going to probably get future business on service and all of that. They'll probably give you their honest opinion.
Yeah, and you can even go back and talk to whoever the lead service tech is or mechanic and say, hey, I'm looking at buying such bike, especially if they're a dealership that caters to that brand. Have you seen many of those come in? Have you seen any, recurring themes or problems with them? And they may say, oh, yeah, such and such is a piece of crap on that. Okay, well, it doesn't mean it's not a good bike still. It just means that's something to be aware of when you're going to get it. And maybe that's a part you need to upgrade or just something you need to be cognizant of when you go out and take a look at that bike. But Brian's right on that. Lots of times they will share information because you buy that bike, you're going to have to buy parts for it. You're going to have to maintain the bike, or you might be bringing it into that dealership for service. So it doesn't matter if you're buying it from a private party or another dealership, further away, you're probably going to travel to the closest one to get what you need for it. So it's a good point. Next part of this is test riding. Now, I know this is something that a lot of dealerships don't allow. I don't know why. I do know Ducati has authorized test dealerships where they're supposed to have basically every new make and model, or not every new make, they're all Ducatis, but every new model on the floor, at least a version of it to allow you to go ride. I get it, guys. Not every dealership's going to let you test ride a bike, but there are ways to still test ride bikes at dealerships. And part of it's going to come back to what Brian just mentioned. You need to have a relationship there. And if you do have that relationship, they'll toss you I say keys, but anymore it's the stupid fobs. They'll toss you the fob and go, here, go out and take it for a spin. Now, obviously, you're not going to take it out. I mean, I'm not going to say I've never taken them out for days or weeks at a time. Most people are not going to be allowed to take them out for that long, but maybe an hour or two. And I think, we got some dealerships locally that allow you to take them out.
Yeah, the biggest thing I think you can do that, even if it's not a long ride, the most important part is just feeling comfortable on the bike. And you can test that out in a very short time, because the last thing you want to do is get a bike and go, I don't really feel right on it.
Yeah, and you don't want to, we've got riser bars and we've got different seats and we've got all this different stuff, but the bike just doesn't fit you to begin with. I don't care how much stuff you bolt onto it. You're going to have a difficult time making that bike fit you. And if it doesn't, you're not going to ride it. And, you just got a lawn ornament sitting out there because you're not doing what the bike was meant to do, which is to ride. There are some other ways to get test rides. And also keep in mind, at least most ads I see for used bikes, you can take a ride on it as long as you hand that cash over first, because if you total it, that guy's keeping the money, and congratulations, you just bought yourself a wrecked motorcycle. But when we're talking about new bikes, most major manufacturers, if you go onto their website, have demo days listed for different areas. I mean, a lot of them send a trailer around to either different dealerships or different events where you can go out and test ride bikes. Keep in mind, those are going to be a little bit different in that it's going to be a follow the leader format in most cases. So don't expect to go very fast or really like push the bike too much, but at least you can get on it and ride it. And then some other things to look at as part of those events. I've been to the MotoGP race down in Austin a couple of times. I've been to Supercross events where they've had the Daytona Bike Week, Sturgis, all those sorts of things. There's typically manufacturers there giving demo rides. They're structured rides. You're not going to ride super far on them, but at least you can test out the bike. And then, just check out your local dealership. Lots of times they're going to have demo days. Sometimes it's a part of the manufacturer's thing, and then sometimes it's just, they got 5 demo bikes on the floor and a bunch of used bikes, and they go, hey, anybody can come out and ride today. I mean, you see that happen fairly often. But if I was going to give you a tip for how to get a ride on a new motorcycle at a dealership that you haven't built a relationship with, it's usually best. Well, it's one of two things. Come in on a motorcycle. Now, if you come in on a Ninja 250 and you're looking to buy the new Panigale V4, this tip is not going to help you. You want to come in on maybe not a comparable bike, but look the part. Talk the part when you get in there. Talk to the salesman. Do not walk in first thing and just say, hey, I want to test out such and such. I can pretty much guarantee the answer is going to be no. Walk in, talk to the guy. You know, they're going to ask you if you need help. And you can say, well, I'm interested in such and such bike. This is the type of riding I want to do. Ask questions. Build up a little rapport. Say, you know, maybe you've got it narrowed down to two different bikes, and you say, I'm trying to decide between, you know, this Honda or this BMW, and I can't decide which one I want. I'd really like to maybe take this one out for a test spin. Is that possible? There's a good chance they're going to say yes. Now, make sure you got your driver's license. Make sure you've got your motorcycle endorsement. You know, make sure all those bases are covered. But you have, if you don't have the relationship, you at least need to build up a rapport. And if they tell you we want you to fill out a financing form, just say, no, I'm paying cash for it. I'm not filling out a finance form. But if you're serious about it and you're genuine about it, chances are they're going to let you take the bike for a test ride.
I couldn't agree more. I do want to offer one warning to current motorcycle owners. When you ride another bike, there is a high possibility that you'll want that bike. I currently love my Yamaha FJR, but I got on Mario's bike, and it's all I've been thinking about. I loved my bike, and now I can only think about getting the
Yeah, I made them. Well, I didn't make the mistake. It's not going to cost me anything. But, you know, I put some 50/50 tires on my Super Adventure because I wanted to get them broke in a little bit before I did the Mid-Atlantic BDR trip. And I was just going to test them out. We were out there, you know, just dirt bike riding out of the farm one weekend. I don't remember if was it even a race weekend or I don't remember. Charity event.
The charity event, yeah.
So I knew there were a bunch of dirt roads and gravel roads around the area. So I went out, you know, one afternoon, went and ripped and teared and kind of got the tires scrubbed in. And Brian had never ridden a Super Adventure or any of the KTM adventure bikes before. And, you know, we've had some talks about doing some dual sport. We'll call them dual sport rides right now. I don't really want to throw out what they are because then people might hold us accountable to actually go out and do them. But big rides, you know, but where you need an adventure bike or at least a dual sport bike. So I tossed him. My bike actually has a key. I tossed him the key and I knocked him down to whatever, like, I don't remember his enduro mode. So he only had 100 horsepower and he went out and rode for a while. And then I was like, all right, now I'm going to turn off some of the rider aids. We're going to give you the full 160. And that's always been thinking about since. So
Still smiling.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing wrong with the FJR, great bike, but you're a dirt bike guy and it fits you perfectly. So, all right. So the last thing we want to talk about before we get into a break. So I said, talk to people who actually own the bike. I did not say go on forums and do research.
The black hole.
Listen, I have an account at ADV Rider, you know, on their forums. I think I have 2 posts. I mainly just go on there to look for bikes that are for sale. I haven't bought any of them yet, but I love doing that, or gear or whatever. They're great for that. If you want to do some general research, maybe not too bad, but you got to be careful because let's think about it. And also, I think I still have one on like Thumper Talk. I don't know. I got a couple of them. I'm seldom on there. And, you know, when I say go to people, even if you haven't met the person, but they are a person, like, and that's why I feel like I get so many emails. Like, okay, a lot of you guys I've never met before, but you know I'm out riding. I show that to you. You know, you've seen the odometer. You know the type of riding I do. Like, you're riding along, you know, in the videos. So I'm not full of crap. I may not always be right, but I'm not full of crap. Like, I have gone out and done, you know, ridden the bike. I work on the bikes. I can answer those sorts of questions. The problem with the forums is, for me, is twofold, and it's probably even deeper than that. Number one, most people that aren't just a member of the forum, that just like to surf around and look at things, are going to forums because they have a problem. They have an issue, and this goes for car forums, motorcycle, any sort of forums, especially ones that, you know, when we're dealing with mechanical things. They have a problem that they need solved. So all of a sudden, you start doing a search of, you know, the Honda, I can't even think of a Honda, the Honda Africa Twin. And the first 8 posts you see are problems with that bike, and you start freaking out going, oh man, this is a major problem with it. That might be like 5 different guys that have had that problem out of thousands of bikes that have been sold. And by the way, most people aren't even on forums that ride. So, I mean, it's a percentage of a percentage, and you start to freak out. And then someone comes on and, oh, we need a class action lawsuit. Honda's screwing us on that. Just be careful with the forums. The other issue with the forums is most of those guys, and I say guys because I feel like it's mostly guys on there, and I'm not calling out anyone specific. You're hiding behind an avatar, behind a handle. No one knows who you are. I mean, I've got friends on some of the forums, and I didn't know they were commenting, and they're like, hey, by the way, I'm sewing. You have no idea who they are. And you have that, you can come on and say whatever you want, and no one knows if you're telling the truth or not. So, I don't know. That's why I stay off of there.
Yeah, and I think the other problem is you don't know who is real. There are people on the forums that have great advice, but the problem is everybody on there behind their avatar looks like a master mechanic. And out of all the comments that you get, one person knows what he's talking about and 8 other people don't. And you're going to start trying each one. And you're going to go, well, this person said this, let me try this. When really there was only one answer and you wasted all this time trying all these different things to fix your motorcycle.
No, you're right about that. So, and that was unfair of me to say that I didn't say everyone's an idiot. But you will have a couple of experts on there. But trying to filter through who's telling me the right information and who's telling me the wrong information, you can't tell. And if you go off post count, well, this guy's posted 2,500 times. Well, why is he not out riding? Where you might have the guy on there that's posted like 6 times because he was legitimately trying to help you out because he knows how to solve that problem. You don't know which one's telling you the right thing.
Or he's busy working on motorcycles.
Yeah, I mean, you might, because most guys aren't going to go on there, and even if they did, again, how can you tell? We don't have pictures. We don't have, we can't tell who people are on the forums, but even if you said, well, I've been a mechanic for such and such amount of time, some idiot hiding behind an avatar will go, well, you're stupid. You don't know what you're talking about. I mean, it's just, it's hard to filter.
Or you could be a mechanic, right? In your avatar.
Yeah.
I'm a mechanic.
You can
but
be,
you're not a mechanic.
You can be whoever you want online.
Exactly.
I mean, you really can.
Yes.
And I realize that's hypocritical of me to say, but I mean, you can be whoever you want online. I would love to have John Ross on one time to talk about forums. That guy can go off on a 10, 15-minute tangent. And what's funny is people used to walk into his shop and he go, "What, did you read that on a forum?" And inevitably they go, well, yeah, and he's like, well, you're an idiot. Get off of there. So anyway, that's
future
just,
guest.
Yeah, we will definitely. John Ross, he has a lot of information to share about motorcycles, and I'd love to have him on at some point. That is the only person we're going to mention about a possible guest. We're not mentioning anyone else that we already have lined up. So anyway, we are we done on forums?
I think we're good.
I mean, the moderators for like ADV Rider are probably going to be upset with me now, and people that post on
they
them.
have good advice, but you have to be very aware that you're going to get a lot of BS in there too.
Yeah, Brian's right. All right, guys, we are going to take a quick break, and then we will be back to get a little bit more specific when it comes to street bikes and what to look for when you're buying your next motorcycle. All right, and we are back, and we're going to talk about a little bit more in the specifics when it comes to street bikes, and just give a few things to think about on there. This is just my advice. If you're a first-time motorcycle buyer, do not buy the fastest street bike available. Do not buy a leader bike. Buy something that you can afford to drop. Buy something that you don't mind, I don't want to say crashing, but at least, dropping in you're going to have, especially if you've never really ridden before. Now, if we're talking about kids that have been riding dirt bikes their entire lives and now they want to, they're going to be okay. I mean, some of those kids are better on a motorcycle than I am. But actually, a lot of them are better than on a motorcycle than I am. But don't go out and spend a ton of money if you've never really ridden before. And that goes for 2 reasons. One, you probably just don't have the skills to ride it. And 2, if you've never really ridden on the street before and now you want to start street bike riding, you may find out you don't like it. So why invest a bunch of money into a depreciating thing, especially a new one? I'd always recommend buying a used bike. Just buy something you can afford, see if you like it. And then if you do like it, then you can start to decide the type of riding you want to do and then start to pick out that next motorcycle.
Yeah, and even if you've ridden dirt bikes your whole life, I think the motorcycle is a whole different thing. There is a learning curve still there. It's a different style of riding. Obviously, the clutch and the brake, you have all those skills. You're used to the rear end sliding. you have those skills, but it's still a different animal. And so you want to make sure what fits me on the street.
No, I agree. And it's something else to think about on there. What is your skill level? And what type of bike? So this isn't anything against leader bikes. They're fun as hell. But, and I know some guys will argue with me and go, yeah, I'll get maximum performance out of it. Not legally, you won't. I mean, I can't get anywhere near maximum performance out of my super adventure on road legally. Off road, I can't get maximum performance out of it anyway. But think about it and go, what is my actual skill level? Is this bike right for me? And then you've got all the different types of bikes. And this is where it comes back to, what do you want to do on it? So, right now, ADV bikes, I haven't looked at the sales numbers, but at least popularity-wise amongst motorcyclists, I feel like it boomed big time the last few years. Every manufacturer's got at least one ADV bike out. And now what we're starting to see, where everyone came out with their like premier one, like KTM with their 1290s and Honda with their Africa Twin and Yamaha with the Super Tenere. Now we're all coming out with smaller displacement ones because not everyone needs the 160, 110, however much horsepower. And now we're starting to come out with some of the 700, 790, 800 cc's. And, now we're coming out with the 400 cc bikes, as a gateway to get in. So the adventure bikes, I mean, you've only ridden one once, but the cool thing about those are, listen, let's be honest. Most people on BMW GSs are not riding them off-road. It's not a knock on you guys that do, because I know there's some of you that can ride some super gnarly stuff. But you guys know the stereotype. We're gonna hop up. We're gonna wake up on Sunday morning. We're gonna ride our adventure bikes and our climb gear up to Starbucks, and we're gonna sit around and talk about the rides that we want to do. But the nice thing about them they are kind of a Swiss Army knife of motorcycles. They're comfortable enough to tour on. They have off-road capability. They've got enough power and handling to go out and ride some fun roads. Like they do a little bit of everything, which I think is why they've become so popular. Or maybe it's just Ewan McGregor and Charlie Borman doing their long way around and long way down, and everybody's like, yeah, I want to do that.
No, I mean, specifically talking for me, it's why I want one. At the end of the day, I can't have 5 different bikes. I come from more of a background in dirt bikes, but I love motorcycles, so I'm trying to find that kind of balance point where I can do some off-roads, some of the, back roads and some of the gravel roads, but then also take a trip. And I don't need a separate bike to travel across country. I can have that bike and then also hit some of the dirt roads and stuff that is more familiar to me.
Yeah, and I think that's what's cool about them is okay, they're not going to handle like your 350 handles. 350, is that what you got? 350 is going to handle off-road because it weighs twice as much. But if you keep momentum on those things, they do off-road pretty well. But even if you're not going to take it off-road and you're just like, I want something. I mean, Tyler and I, my buddy Tyler, he's got a 1290R, and he's taking it all across the country. He does take his off-road some. But he was like, even on like crappy paved roads, man, having all that suspension travel instead of me bottoming out on a sport bike or a sport touring bike, I've got all that suspension travel, and it's comfortable. And you and I were talking offline earlier, like I've smoked guys on R6s before. One, not always the bike, it's the rider. But 2, if we're riding a road that's not paved real well, that poor dude's back there bottoming out, and I'm like, no, my bike's staying nice and level.
Yeah, I think it gets back to the point I probably already said this earlier, but the best motorcycle is the one that you feel comfortable on. When I jumped on your bike, it felt more at home, even though it's much heavier. It felt like my dirt bike. I just felt at home.
And what's crazy about those things, I've already said, I don't really notice the weight as long as I'm moving. And what I mean by moving, I mean even along like 5-10 miles an hour, it's when I had to turn one of those things around in a single track and needed help, that's when I felt the weight. But yeah, so, the ADV bikes have kind of taken over. We got sport bikes. I don't think sport bike numbers, sales numbers have dropped off the last few years, probably more than the last few years. They're not going anywhere. They're always going to be cool. Everybody's still going to want to emulate their favorite, MotoGP rider. Like, they're always going to be there. But you just have to ask yourself, again, what type of riding am I going to do? And if you're going to go do track days, but still ride on the street, I mean, that's a great option. Just be cognizant of your budget and everything else. And there's a chance you're going to wad that bike up out on the track. But hey, it's safer wadding it up on the track than it is, out on the road. But they have their limitations. And don't, this is another thing that we make, what do I want to say here? More comfortable versions of detuned versions of sport bikes. They're still sport bikes, but they're not the R model or the RR model, or now I think Honda's coming out with an RRRR model. You can get the baseline model where it's slightly detuned. You may not be getting, if we're talking 600cc bikes, maybe you're only getting 80 horsepower. That doesn't make that bike slow out on the street. You're still not going to push it to 100%. And there's an old saying that it's more fun to ride a slow bike fast than it is a fast bike slow. I got buddies of mine that could, you could throw me on a 600 or a liter bike and they're going to smoke me on an SV650. Like, there's plenty of great bikes out there. So don't get hung up if you want a sport bike on, well, I got to buy the one with the biggest performance numbers because such and such magazine said this is the fastest one available. If you don't have the skill level to match it, it really doesn't matter.
Yeah, exactly. I think at the end of the day, don't focus on the CCs. Focus on your skill. I think if you work on building your skills, one, you're a safer rider, but then you can be fast on anything.
And then, I guess the other two main, there's always standard motorcycles, and we're not going to get into the nitty gritty on all these. I just wanted to throw out a few things to think about. And you've got touring bikes, and even touring bikes are split up into grand touring, which would be your Goldwing or your BMW GTL, and sport touring, which would be more like your Yamaha FJR 1300 or Kawasaki Concours. Those are great options, and those are bikes, especially the sport touring bikes, that are a little bit lighter weight, and they're great commuter bikes, they're great touring bikes, they're sporty enough, where, the BMW and the Honda, you know what, you can commute on those too. They're going to be optimal for, at least highway travel and long distance travel. And, they handle decent enough that you can go out and have some fun on them. And then you got your cruisers, and this never been my thing, but, there's nothing wrong with it. It depends on what type of riding you want to do. If you live down in Florida and want to ride up and down, actually a cruiser is probably perfect in Florida because everything's straight and flat down there. They don't even have curves. So a cruiser's probably perfect. Weather's always nice. They look cool. Like, cruisers do have a cool look to them. It's just never been my thing because every time I've taken one out, I always end up dragging hard parts because I'm like, hey, this thing's supposed to go around a turn. Like, that's why I like to ride, but some people, cornering's not important to them.
Yeah, there's a huge market for that.
So anyway, just wanted to touch on a few of the bikes. And then the other thing I want to touch on specific to street riding and something you need to take into account, especially when it comes to your budget, is riding gear. Now, there is a plethora of schools of thought on riding gear. You have the at-gat guys, all the gear all the time. And you have I'm wearing pants or shorts and I'm good to go. Like, we've got it all over the place. So anyway, I guess I am most of the gear, or all of the gear most of the time, or whatever. I mean, most of the time, and there's always caveats to everything, but personally, I like to wear a jacket, riding pants, motorcycle-specific boots, gloves, helmet. That's what I say 99% of the time. Have I ridden without a helmet on before? Yes, I have. When I'm in states where that's legal and I'm riding around in town at low speeds. But I'm going to be honest with you, like, I get skeeved out if we get on like a 45-mile-an-hour road. Doesn't require that helmet's coming on immediately.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been told you plan for the crash. I don't ever want to crash.
No.
But I'd rather have the gear on. And
I think, especially if you're looking at, what's the minimum you can ride in? All right, you can probably, this is Mario's opinion. Brian can say what he wants to say, and I'm not saying this is right or wrong. I'm just saying this is what I am comfortable in minimum. I'm always going to have gloves on. The reason for that is I remember when I was a kid, my uncle had debris come back and hit him in the finger. He still can't bend his finger all the way because they had to tie the tendons back together. He's always worn gloves since then. I'm never not going to wear gloves. At absolute minimum, even if long sleeves, long pants, something up over the ankle. But typically you're going to find me, if I'm not wearing my full riding gear, you're going to find me in a pair of boots, preferably riding boots, but you can get away with a really good work boot, hiking boot, comes up over the ankle, gloves, top-notch helmet. And I only wear a Rye or Shoei, at least on the road, just for the comfort and the quietness and everything else. But get something that's Snell rated, DOT rated, ECE rated if you can get it. Just make sure it fits well. Riding jacket, and then jeans. And I've got Kevlar jeans, riding jeans, those sorts of things. But even just regular jeans. But again, if I'm getting ready to take off on a big motorcycle trip, no, I'm wearing my full gear. But if I'm going 10 miles down the road, and I know you can crash at any point in time, but if I'm going a few miles down the road, I might just throw my riding jacket on with my gloves and a pair of boots and my helmet and be done with it for that.
Yeah, I've always been kind of a work boot, jean, riding jacket, good helmet type of rider. Recently, I switched and got some waterproof gear, and I tell you, it changes for me. Now I don't ever look at the weather. I'm more of a commuter rider. I ride my motorcycle to work every day. That was a big step for me. I'm really enjoying having the kind of the full outfit now because I don't have to worry about whatever else I'm wearing, where I need to go. That's all safe.
Yeah, and some of that comes to the bike too. Like, if you've got room to like pack your riding gear on the bike, then, or not your riding gear, but your like work clothes, and you get your suit on, you come in, you change clothes. Like it's very convenient to do it that way, especially when you're talking about waterproof stuff. So anyway, have we covered everything we want to cover on street bikes?
I think so.
All right, we are going to take a quick break, and then we're going to come back and cover dirt bikes, but we're going to cover them from two different standpoints. We're going to cover them from the standpoint of adults, and we'll get into some youth stuff too, because we want the sport to continue to grow, so we need young riders. All right, guys, and now we are back, and we're going to talk about, speaking of SX CS, we're going to talk about some dirt bikes now. So, I don't know, Brian, when it comes to buying a dirt bike, we're going to talk adults first. What do you think? Skill, we got to take skill level into account.
Yeah, it kind of goes back to similar to the motorcycle. What are you going to do with it? There's motocross, there's hare scrambles. Are you going to try and do a little bit more difficult riding, more technical riding up and down the mountains? You just have to take into account and do the same thing you did with the motorcycle. What am I going to use this dirt bike for?
No, you're right. I mean, and you may not know early on, am I going to race it? Am I just going to go trail ride it? And listen, trail riding means totally different things to different people. Some people, trail riding is, I've got a grass loop cut out at my farm, and I'm going to ride that. And then you throw them back into the woods, and they're like, holy, you guys ride this close to trees? Like, I didn't know anybody did this. So you really just have to decide, what it is you want to do on the bike. And if you're not going to do anything, if you're not going to race it and you just want to go out and something to putt around on or even push every once in a while and have fun, you can get away with a trail bike, just an old air-cooled trail bike and have fun on it. They're cheap and they don't require much maintenance. You can, especially if it's like, we were talking earlier, like if it's a Honda XR or CRF series, change the oil sometime and that thing will run forever. I mean, there's really not much to do on it.
Yeah, and you have to take into consideration your location as well. My biggest advice to people when they're on the East Coast and they're saying, I'm going to do trail riding, is do not buy a 450cc dirt bike. You don't need it. I know very fast AA pro riders, and they're fine on a 250. You'll be fine. But maybe if you are on the West Coast and you're doing a lot of desert riding, that 450,
yeah, 450, 500, something like that might be right, because you're going wide open throttle for big wide open sections. But here on the East Coast, I mean, we're riding mountains, we're riding old coal mines, we're riding more technical stuff where that extra horsepower doesn't gain you anything. In fact, you're just going to wear out faster because the bike's heavier. You just don't need it, or you split the difference if you're skilled enough to go with like a 300 or a 350, because you can actually make use of that additional power because you're a little bit more of a skilled rider versus buying that bigger bike. So the other things just to keep in mind, like, I kind of already touched on this, like the Honda air-cooled engines, they're pretty much bulletproof. And it's not just Honda. I mean, Kawasaki makes them, Suzuki makes them. I guess Yamaha with like the TTRs. Like, they aren't race bikes. They don't come with the greatest suspension. But if you're just looking to go have fun on a motorcycle and learn, especially, learn to ride off-road, they're fine for that. The KTM is going to require more maintenance. It just is.
And I think the cool thing about the kind of the smaller bike and that trail bike that you're just talking about is if you stick with it, one, it's a cheap entry point. And if you stick with it, you don't have to sell that bike. Trust me. I still want one of those bikes all the time to, if you're at a racetrack and you just want to kind of putt around, or you want to kind of go from point A to point B, or, go around your property, go get the mail. Like, that bike will always be used, even if you outgrow it and you need a higher skill level bike.
No, you're right. I mean, I still got it's Kristen's bike, and I've got 2 other ones that I've had for 2 years that I still haven't put back together, but I've got some old Honda CRF 100s. Yes, I can ride that bike past what it's capable of, but it's still fun to ride, and I don't do anything to it. Like, I clean the air filter on it. It sounds terrible. Maybe once a year, and I change the oil on it maybe once a year, and that's it. Like, you don't have to do anything else to it. And what's cool, I mean, it's small enough now. I think Noah's been riding it for a while now, but my wife can ride it. I can ride it. I've thrown kids that just wanted to learn to ride dirt bikes on it, and I don't care if they crash it. You can't hurt those things. And you're right. You won't get rid of that bike. And if you think about getting rid of it because, oh, well, now I'm going to buy, a new 250 SXF, don't get rid of it. Just keep it. Because like Brian said, I mean, not every race series will allow this, but plenty of them will. Like pit riding, it really depends on the series, but just something to putt around on while you're there, if it's trail day or whatever the case may be. It just gives you something to mess around on. And when we go out to riding events or trail rides, like ride down to your buddy's camper and go see him, or, whatever. Throw it in the back of the truck if you think you're going to be somewhere where, you can find a place to ride. Just, they're fun.
Absolutely.
All right. So I guess one thing we need to touch on here, because this is no longer an issue with street bikes. 2-stroke or 4-stroke?
So I still go back to 2-stroke diehard, because that's what I grew up racing, but I'm torn. So for racing, for me, I'm naturally faster. It's just what fits me better. So as a racer, 4-stroke is the way to go. Now, as I'm transitioning out of racing and more into fun, I love the 2-stroke and the hit. But if you're just starting out, get one of those trail bikes, and then I would move to whatever you feel comfortable. But yes, the 4-stroke is going to give you better traction. If you're riding off-road and hill climbs, it will help you better, but it won't make you a better rider. If you start on a 2-stroke, it's going to be more challenging. You need to have better clutch control. All of those aspects come into play. But in the long run, riding the 2-stroke will make you a better rider.
So if I ask my 10-year-old this, he's definitely saying 2-stroke. But all the 4-strokes I've put him on have been like trail bikes, and they're just dogs. Like, they're not fast. So he's used to that power of the 2-stroke, and I think that's part of it.
Yeah, for the youth, I mean, that's
your only option.
King of the bike.
Yeah. And those of you that are more experienced on motorcycles, you already know what I'm about to say. But these questions come along where people ask, well, what's the difference? There's a lot of differences, but I'm just going to touch on the 2 big ones. One, the 2-stroke is a simpler motor, though you do have to mix your gas and oil, or some of the newer ones, you've got the oil reserve on it, it'll do it for you. But the 2-stroke is cheaper to maintain, in that it's cheaper to rebuild a top end on a 2-stroke. You can put a new top end on a 2-stroke in under an hour, and you basically have like a brand new engine again. Where the 4-stroke, it's a more complex engine. However, they have gotten much, much better over the years, and they require less maintenance now. But it is going to cost you more. The other big thing is, and I was talking to Rusty about this, he's like, oh, what should I get? And I was like, you've only ever ridden on the street. You've only ever ridden 4-strokes. Stick with what you know. Because the weirdest thing for me, like the first time I rode a 2-stroke, is those of you who are used to riding 4-strokes, when you back off the throttle, the bike slows down. Like if you're going downhill, because you've got engine braking. Now, obviously, depends on what gear you're in, but it's going to engine brake. It's going to slow you down. And when you're riding a 2-stroke and you let off going downhill because you're like, oh crap, I'm going too fast, you don't slow down. It's like we just put it in neutral. Like the bike continues to carry the momentum. There's no right or wrong. You just have to get used to that. And that's what Brian was saying. If you can learn to ride on the 2-stroke, then you'll be fine on the 4-stroke. But, jumping from one back to the other, riding the 2-stroke ultimately is probably going to make you a better rider and probably put more money in your pocket.
It's just different riding style. Even as I jump from a 4-stroke to 2-stroke, I have to kind of relearn and go, okay, I got to ride this differently. I got to brake differently. I got to be heavier on the brakes because I'm not having that engine braking. So just different riding.
So then the only other thing I want to talk about, when it comes to dirt bikes and what guys are looking for, because ultimately it all comes back to what do I want to do on the bike? How much money do I have to spend? And you know what? Speaking of money to spend, let me touch on this first before we get to the last thing I want to talk about. Riding gear. What do they need riding gear wise?
the biggest thing is boots. I think seeing people get away with riding boots on a dirt bike, you just can't do it. You can get away on the street doing that, but that is the most important aspect of riding. Get your boots. You want long pants, you want long sleeves. Riding gear is definitely preferable, but you don't need the latest and greatest or the super big name brand. Spend your money on the boots and a good helmet.
Yeah, I think those are the two biggest things. Who cares about the latest colorways? Look for the year-end closeouts if you want, a riding jersey and pants. But you can get away with jeans. I got to be honest with you, jeans are not going to be that comfortable on a dirt bike, but they will hold up pretty well in a crash. So that's fine if that's all you have. Throw on a long sleeve T-shirt or sweatshirt or something like that if that's all you can afford or that's all you have up front. But if you can afford to buy the pants and the jersey, just look for year-end closeout stuff. No one cares that you're wearing the 2019 stuff. No one's going to come up to you and go, "Where's the 2020 gear that so-and-so came out with?" Who cares? Because we're riding stuff that's 4 or 5 years old. Like, you don't want to have to buy new stuff every year. No one's sponsoring me to go out and ride in their latest gear. Like, I don't get to pick that, my specific colorways. Definitely want some gloves on. Good helmet always. You do need goggles. I mean, I guess you could get away with wearing your ADV helmet if you had one, but you still want goggles. I'm not saying don't spend a lot of money on goggles. Just get a quality pair. But you don't have to spend $100 on a set of goggles. $20-$30 is fine. I was telling Rusty the other day, buy the I think the Stratas are the cheapest 100% because they use the same lenses and tear-offs as the Acuris, Racecrafts, and Racecrafts Plus. So if you bump up goggles, you can reuse all that stuff. But Brian's right. Boots, 100%. You have to have great boots. You have to have boots that I still managed to break a toe in my boots. I still don't know how I did it. But if I wouldn't have had those boots on, I mean, chances are I'm in surgery that night, getting my foot repaired or my ankle repaired or whatever. Like, it was a pretty hard crash. But I had my boots on. So,
Yeah, and I think the other big thing to remember is get knee pads, something to cover your knee. Now, yeah. I personally would suggest going to a whole nother level and getting knee braces, because what normally happens in the sport is everyone buys knee braces. They don't buy it until they've torn their ACL, PCL, MCL,
whatever.
That's when they buy them. So yes, it's expensive. Yes, maybe when you're just starting out, you shouldn't do it. But as you start picking up your skill level, I would definitely suggest getting knee braces.
Yeah, that was one of those things. So I started out with knee pads for probably about a year or so. And I noticed guys wearing knee braces. And a lot of them are like, yeah, I won't ride without them. And it's the overwhelming majority. You're like, why do you have them? Well, I've already torn my knee up once. And, it was $10,000 to have that repaired, or I dropped some money on some braces. So I went out and got knee braces, had them fitted and everything. Look into your insurance. Your insurance may cover part of it, as a preventative maintenance, pretty much preventative medical thing. The only other thing we didn't touch on, and this kind of depends. I mean, if you're out riding by yourself, maybe you can get away without one. Look into a chest protector. You definitely don't want to catch the roost of your buddy and having rocks being thrown back in you. But like you brought up earlier, newbies are going to crash. You don't want that handlebar going into your stomach. Like, having that chest protector just gives you an extra layer. So there is some protective gear that you need. There's some you should have, but that's just something you need to take into account if you're going to go ride off road. But I agree, knee pads at absolute minimum, and just plan on spending $250, $300 on a pair of boots.
Yes.
Skimp on some of the other stuff. But spend the money on the boots, because you don't want to have those ankles having to be repaired. So then, now that we've touched on that, the only other thing I want to touch on for dirt bikes: kickstart, electric start. Which one?
So obviously my background is more in the off-road, the kind of, going up and down mountains. If you're in a motocross setting, I don't think the electric start is needed at all. But if you are doing kind of more the enduro hair scrambles, riding through the woods, trying hill climbs, you want the electric start, especially when you're starting. You will fall. You will get frustrated kicking that, 250 or 450 four-stroke, and you're getting frustrated, and you're not getting to enjoy just riding. The electric start helps out so much in that aspect. But if you're on a two-stroke, you don't need the electric start. It's going to kick. It's going to start easy. But if you've gotten looking towards more of the four-stroke style riding, some of them can be a little challenging to start, especially if you're falling every 20, 30 feet. You'll want that electric start.
So basically what Brian is saying, don't buy a Suzuki unless it's a DRZ 400, because I think that's the only electric start Suzuki bike out right now. No, I agree. Electric start's great. I really haven't had any issues out of mine. I do have to replace the torque limiter on my starter now. It's about a 3-year-old bike, but aside from that, electric start's so nice to have. All right, so let's transition. We got a couple of minutes left here into kids' bikes. You want to get your you want to get your son or daughter, or niece or nephew involved in motorcycle riding. What are we looking at for them?
So I'm 100% on the 4-stroke bandwagon for youth, and it can range for, if they're just getting started, we're talking about anywhere from 4 years old, up. Start with the 4-stroke trail type bikes. So for the younger, the 4 to 8 year olds, you have the Honda CRF 50, great bike. I know Suzuki makes one as well. Very minimal maintenance. It's oil changes, air filter changes. That's it. The bike is bulletproof. And then as they're a little bit older, you can get the 110s, 4-strokes. They're great bikes. And then moving into what we kind of even talked about earlier for beginning adults and older children, you kind of have the Kawasaki 140s, the Honda 150s. All these bikes are very minimal maintenance. And even if you outgrow them or your skill level advances past them, they're great bikes, as we talked about earlier, just getting around the track.
No, they're great pit bikes. So, if your kid outgrows it or they decide, hey, I want to race now, so I want a 2-stroke, great. You just inherited yourself a really fun pit bike at that point. You don't have to go buy yourself one, or the kid could ride it. I know Andrew's kids are constantly on the 110s, but then you see him riding around on the 110. Like, they're not going anywhere. And the nice thing about them are they're minimal maintenance. I think most of them are still kickstart. I think once you get up to like the 110s, we're pretty much all electric start at this point.
Yeah, the 50s are kickstart, but yeah.
They're kickstart, but a 5-year-old can kickstart it. Like, you could use your hand as an adult and kickstart one of those 50s. And then you can decide, what you want to do at that point. If you want to get into racing, there's a trail bike class, and, you could take that bike and go ride in it, or you can decide, no, I want to get into true off-road racing, and at that point you're gonna head over to the 2-strokes.
For youth racing, 2-strokes are king, right?
Yeah.
For as far as racing, but there are trail classes. It's definitely something that you'll want to have around for play riding, trail riding, and then introductory into racing. And then you can move to the 2-stroke if you are taking it a little more seriously on the racing side.
And the big thing to know about these bikes is don't worry about plastics being scratched up. That just means somebody rode it. Plastics are cheap and doesn't really matter, because guess what? They're going to get scratched up if you ride them anyway. But with most of the bikes Brian just named off, actually probably all of them, they're all pretty much bulletproof. So if you go over to check out a used one and it runs, just get it. Like, you might have to change the oil in it. You're going to have to change the air filter in it. There's not much else to do to them. Assuming he's got tires on it, the thing's going to go down the trail just fine. So, yeah, you can get your youth into racing. If you look around, you can find a CRF 100 or CRF 50 for $500. Might not be the perfect example, but it'll run. And I would say for $700-800, you can get a nice running example that you can throw the kit on and not have to do anything to it for quite some time. So
yeah, the bikes can be expensive, right? So as we talked with before, if it doesn't fit into your budget for a new bike, definitely don't be scared to buy the used bike, especially the bikes we're talking about. It's very simple. A few changes, the oil change, the air filter change, and that bike will be good to go.
Yeah, you can't hurt those things. We've tried. So anything else you want to talk about today, man? We went down through street bikes. We went through dirt bikes. We even covered some kids' bikes. I'm sure we left something out and people let us know, but anything else you want to throw in there?
No, I just hope everyone, don't feel like it's a barrier. Sometimes the sport, it's a barrier to get into motorcycles because it can be expensive. Don't feel like you need the latest gear, the latest bike. Buying used and buying not the highest gear, that's fine. Just get into the sport, get on a bike, and then go from there. Buy the cheaper option and then say, wow, I really like this. And then you can decide what's next. But don't have that be a barrier and stop yourself from getting into riding a motorcycle.
No, I agree with that. And then once you get involved in the community, there's plenty of people out there willing to help you, that'll pull you in and teach you and train you and just assist. And you'll make new friends. But if you're not out riding, we're probably not going to welcome you as quickly. But if you come to us and go, hey, I'd like to learn to ride, we will find you a bike quickly. I've done that for all of my friends. I will spend your money for you in a few seconds. So anyway, all right, yeah, I enjoyed today's conversation. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did and you're watching this on YouTube, be sure to give it a thumbs up. If you're listening to us on one of the podcast platforms, obviously, you can give us a rating on there. This is only our second episode, so if you want to give us more time to prove ourselves, that's fine. Unless you'd like to give us a 5-star rating on iTunes or whatever, I'm cool with that. So if you guys have any suggestions, guests you'd like Brian and I had to have on, or topics you'd like discussed, you can head over to Facebook to Two Wheeled Rider and leave a comment on there, or you can send us an email at twowheeledrider.com@gmail.com. It's confusing, but I'll put it in the description or on my website on twowheeledrider.com if you're trying to contact us. So, all right, man, I think that pretty much does it. I'm Mario Orsini, and this is
Brian Boyer.
We'll talk to you again soon.